Sometimes the only thing left to do is to call upon the name of Jesus. You're having coffee with Conrad on
Conrad Rocks!
Welcome to yet another edition of Coffee with Conrad. This is Conrad from ConradRocks.net. Now, you know my passion is for you, yes, you, to have a spiritual relationship with the biblical Jesus. Now, sometimes when we have that spiritual relationship with Jesus, the devil is going to try really hard to mess it up. And he's trying to kill you. You know, the devil comes to steal, kill, and destroy. And sometimes he'll bring a hurricane of a storm to do so. Now, if you remember, Jesus was asleep in the back of a boat during a storm in Mark chapter 8. And his disciples, which had been with him for quite some time, they cried out for Jesus to save them. And they say, "Master, do you care not that we perish?" And Jesus was asleep in the back of the boat during this terrible storm that looked like it was going to kill him. It looked like, and their perception of reality was that storm was going to kill them. And Jesus says, "Hey, how is it that you have no faith?" And he speaks to the storm, and he calms the storm. So during prayer one day, I was pondering about how Peter had a relationship with Jesus. He understood the precepts of Jesus. He'd been with him for quite some time. He'd listened to him teach. He'd seen the miracles. And he was in the presence of Jesus at this moment, and he still began to sink and drown. How's that possible? Now, I'm always talking to you about having a relationship, a spiritual relationship with the biblical Jesus. And keep in mind, it wasn't the relationship with Jesus that caused Peter to sink. That's definitely not what caused Peter to sink. In fact, the relationship with Jesus is largely responsible for Peter's faith to actually walk on water.
We are having coffee with Conrad! ConradRocks.net! Jesus rules!
Now, Peter knew beforehand that he had to have a commandment from the Lord in order to walk on water. He couldn't just start walking on water. He needed a commandment from the Lord. This is why Jesus says, "Have faith in God," in that famous passage that the Word of Faith people use in Mark chapter 11. We need to believe what God says and not just name and claim it for our own selfish lusts. That's why Peter says, "If it be you, Lord, command ye me to come out there on the water." And Jesus did, and Peter started walking on water towards Jesus. Now, Peter was exercising his faith to walk on water towards Jesus. I think it's very important that we understand he was walking in faith towards Jesus, not away from Jesus. Keep in mind the prodigal son walked away from the Father, and look where that ended up. But God saw his faith. And as Peter was walking towards him to get even closer, you know, Jesus says in the book of Revelation to those that overcome, he's going to grant for us to sit with him in his throne. Isn't that awesome? But our desire is to be with Jesus, whether he's in heaven or whether he's in the Bronx, right? A lot of people say, "Do you know where you're going to go when you die?" And a lot of people say heaven or hell. And our relationship with Jesus should draw us to be with Jesus no matter where he is. So we need to focus on that. But when Peter was in the presence of Jesus and walking in faith towards Jesus, he got distracted by the storm. Now, storms can come in many forms, and they can all make us feel like we're drowning. We can be drowning in debt. We can be drowning in unforgiveness, drowning in our misplaced faith in men. We can be drowning in despair, something that causes us to have despair. Many such things like that. But these are really our perceptions of reality. It's something that we perceive. And those perceptions of reality cause us to have something called cognitive dissonance. It's something that challenges our faith, and it may cause us to sink. These perceptions of reality challenge our faith, and we begin to slip. And we'll notice that Peter had a relationship with Jesus. He knew the precepts of Jesus. He was walking towards Jesus on water, and he still happened to slip during this storm. So I believe when these perceptions of reality come in, it's how we perceive things to be real. What this means is we're starting to believe that the storm is more real than what Jesus said. It's where we're simultaneously holding these two ideas, the idea of the faith and what we're perceiving to be the reality of the storm, and then this reality of the storm comes in and it just takes over. It's kind of like fear. The Lord has not given us a spirit of fear, but a power, love, and a sound mind. So have you ever noticed that when fear comes on, and I believe fear is from the enemy if the Lord hasn't given it to us, right? It just starts coming on. And it's not full-blown fear yet. It starts out as a little bit of fear, and then you decide to agree with it. We start choosing to let the fear creep in and overtake us. And what we should be doing is casting down immediately that vain imagination which exalts itself against what we know of God. That's the ideal. Just because we're walking through the valley of the shadow of death, it's the shadow of death. It's not death itself, because Jesus is with us. We should exalt the words of Jesus over our fear. But we're all human, and sometimes we can get caught up in these storms, start looking at them, and start drowning. It's a really bad situation. I'm sure we've all been there. But when this happens, when we find ourselves to be like, oh, I'm sinking, I'm drowning, we can follow Peter's example and cry out to God to save us. Lord, save me. Which brings me to Romans 10:13. It's a verse for us to ponder. Whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. Notice at that point, Jesus lifted Peter up to walk on water again, and they both walked back to the boat. None of us are perfect. We're all growing in our faith. That's why we go from faith to faith. And I felt like sharing this word today for those of you that seem to be drowning in your perception of reality of a storm. Jesus saves. Storms are guaranteed to come. Persecution is going to come. And we must, through much tribulation, enter the kingdom of heaven. We're going to go through these trials. We're going to go through the valley of the shadow of death, but he's with us, right? In these trials and persecutions and storms, we're made stronger in our faith once we get through them. So, if you seem to be drowning in your storm, whatever your storm may be, you might want to ask yourself about how this perception of reality is challenging your faith. And back up a little bit, take a look at it, and say, look, I need to have faith in God, like Jesus says. If this has touched you, please share this with your friends and family on social media. I want to thank you for being in my life, and you can follow me on social media. My links will be in the show notes. God bless you. Until we meet again, dig deeper and go higher.
Dig deeper, go higher at ConradRocks.net.